Hi, I'm Sujantra McKeever.
And I'm Shalil Wilson.
And we're exploring the topic of meditation and using as our trail guide, so to speak, the meditation book written by Sri Chinmoy. And right now we're taking a look at the topic of, am I meditating well? And the journey of meditation is very, very powerful and rewarding, and yet it's extremely subjective. And so in the learning process, it's important to have feedback as we learn and grow. And so the question of how do we know if we're meditating well? How do we know if we're moving in the right direction? And Shalil, I know you have meditated for all these over 3 decades, and what feedback loop or how have you encouraged yourself to continue going with a sense of growth and progress?
Well, at a micro level, like during my meditation, I particularly remember when I started meditating, I would be sitting there and then I would go, wow, I'm actually meditating. And then, all of a sudden that's your mind becoming kind of self-aware, and then you'd go, oh God, and then you'd have to sort of get back to that through concentrating on your breath or something like that. But then on a much bigger question, like how am I meditating well on a sort of month-to-month, a year-to-year basis, I've always felt that the fact that I continued meditating regularly, daily, more than like a couple of times daily, that to me, that was the proof that I was meditating well. Not the actual, necessarily, the fact that how I would feel after any particular meditation. Because, that can depend on so many things, like what's happening in your life and so on. But the fact that this continued practice was in place and stayed in place, that is proof that you're meditating well. So people shouldn't get caught up at all in, did I have a good meditation today as compared to yesterday or so on? It's just the fact that you've incorporated this very regular, disciplined practice into your life. That's proof I'm meditating well.
So in other words, just the fact that you're coming back to it is showing that you're enjoying it and growing and learning from it.
Yeah, there's something inside you which is sustaining the practice, and something in the meditation which is sustaining you. So it sort of is a two-way street, but and both are necessary.
For myself, one thing I look for in my meditation is some type of shift of consciousness or shift of awareness. And when I was first learning to meditate, the difference between being in my mind and in all my thoughts, and that contrasted with being in my heart or feeling that peaceful meditation, was quite dramatic. And so in my own practice, I'd set aside 10 or 15 minutes, and I would really try to get to that transition point where I shifted more into my heart. And when I would get there, for me in the beginning, that's what a successful meditation was, to be able to shift my awareness. And then as I continued to meditate, you mentioned for months or years, I started to have some peak experiences, and seemingly out of nowhere, I would have an incredible meditation where time would go very quickly, or I would feel really, really deep peace. And the next day I would try to replicate everything I had done that day, run the same amount, eat the same food, and see if I would have that same incredible meditation, and it never worked.
Right.
And I think it's a very unique moment, and when those moments come, I take it as the universe giving me a shot in the arm, or a sense of encouragement that, hey, keep going, you're moving in the right direction.
Right. Yeah, it's absolutely true. I had the same experience. I would go, oh man, I got to get back there, and sometimes you could, sometimes you couldn't. It's almost like the experience that you would have in any particular given meditation is largely not up to sort of you consciously. It might be up to another part of yourself that you may or may not have direct access to, but it's not like, I want to have a good meditation today, therefore you do. It doesn't work like that. There's higher forces at play.
And one of the meditation instructors who I've heard quite a bit, Mohian, the center leader here in San Diego, the center leader of the Sri Chinmoy Center in San Diego, he often describes meditation as the process of just quieting your mind and letting your soul come forward. So letting creating space for that deeper part of you to come forward. In the meditation book, which I mentioned, Sri Chinmoy, one of my favorite quotes in the book is he says, we can know whether we're meditating well or not by the way we feel about the world around us. And he goes on to say, if we see the world in a loving and kind way, in spite of its imperfections, then you can know that you're meditating well. And I think that how we see the world entirely depends on how we see ourselves. And so, in other words, if you come out of meditation loving yourself and feeling good about yourself, and yet at the same time accepting or acknowledging your imperfections. So it's not that meditation all of a sudden turns you into a flawless human being, but I think it starts to transform you into a human being who can see themselves honestly, accept our imperfections, and yet feel a joy and a happiness with living and moving forward.
Right. And just getting back to the point about the good meditation and then wanting to replicate that, definitely in Sri Chinmoy's writings, many times I've seen him say, you cannot eat the most delicious meal every day, but you do have to eat. So you do have to meditate. And
that delicious meal is that deep, profound experience. And the meditation is so exciting because of those moments when there is a real opening. And I think also equally exciting of just knowing that if you practice regularly, you're going to build up the strength, you're going to build up the necessary energy for that transformation, for those deep qualities. Back to the quote that I mentioned, how we feel about the world around us in spite of its imperfections. How do you, when you're having a good meditation, how do you deal with those imperfections? So you're feeling peace, you're feeling calmness, and yet you see inside yourself, oh, I'm selfish, or I'm greedy, or I'm, how do you balance those two things?
Well, I think when you're having those good meditations, you're not really aware of that part of yourself because you're immersed in the higher parts of yourself. And so it sort of doesn't, in a sense, come up because your awareness is focused more on your higher qualities. And not to say that those qualities aren't there, they're just not expressing themselves at that moment. And I think that's the illuminating part of it, is the light that you're expressing or receiving gradually seeps into those unlit parts of yourself. I don't ever think that you have to concentrate on those negative parts of yourself, but rather to just invoke the higher parts of yourself to become more and more prominent.
And maybe also part of it is the experience of, as you start to feel and experience these deeper parts of yourself, then the parts of yourself that need work, you realize that they're a very small part of yourself. Whereas sometimes I've seen people who really fixate on a pretty small part of themselves that they don't like or that they have a problem with, and they fixate so much on that they lose the big picture. And meditation for me and connecting with my heart is about remembering that big picture, and then the little elements of the picture that I need to work on, they're there, I acknowledge them, but know that, or feel confidence that I have this awareness of this bigger energy that can easily deal with these things.
Right.
Just referencing the quote one more time, Sri Chinmoy again says, if we can see the world in a loving way, in spite of its imperfections. And I think that's also an important thing, is how we relate to the world. When you come out of a good meditation, there's some enthusiasm and some energy to be part of the world and to play our role in the world. So that's one thing that I've gotten from meditation, is an energy or a feeling of I can improve my own consciousness through meditation. And now as I come out of meditation, part of the process is how can I offer that?
Right. Yeah, I've found that obviously meditation is an integral part of my life, but in the impact that it's had in sort of all aspects of my life, it finds expression in all the fields of my endeavour, and even workmates and colleagues and so on comment that they feel something in that, and I can't take credit for that. Only sort of my soul can take credit for it, or God can take credit for it. It's just something that happens on a natural in a natural way, because you're having this daily practice of invoking those qualities to find expression in your life, and they do, and people feel it. They feel it consciously or unconsciously, and they'll ask what's unique about what you do. Yeah.
Here in San Diego, we have the Sri Chinmoy Center has a vegetarian restaurant, and one time I met some customers at a festival where I had a yoga festival booth, and a couple came up to me, a younger couple, and the young man and his wife, and the woman said, "Hey, I've always wanted to ask you something. I've always wanted to ask you guys something." She says, "I eat at the restaurant all the time, and every time I leave, I feel really, really happy."
Right.
And she says, "Why is that?" And I said, well, it's good food is one thing. But I said, well, everyone who works there is meditating and trying to bring forward their own best consciousness. And I think that goes into the whole experience, and it permeates into people. And she got a big smile. She turned to her boyfriend, her husband, and said, "See, I told you." It's because they all meditate.
Right.
And so, like you're saying, that energy seeps and flows into everything that we do. So, bottom line, I think, is to practice every day. Know that from people who have practiced meditation, from the books you read, to have the confidence to know that if you practice regularly, you will grow, and meditation will bring you the experiences that you're ready for when you're ready for them.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'm Sujantra McKeever.
And I'm Shalil Wilson.